What's up everybody? In this video I'm going to share the fundamentals and basic techniques of analog bass synthesis and how you can use them to create a bunch of different bass sounds in any synthesizer. Let's jump right in. So we are in Ableton Live looking at a new instance of Synonym, and you might be wondering, why are we looking at a digital plugin inside a computer but talking about analog synthesis? And analog synthesis kind of means two things. And one, it's kind of synonymous for subtractive synthesis, so the type of synthesis where you work with different waveforms and shape them with filters. And then, of course, it stems from having analog machines that work with electronics to create waveforms and then kind of do this process. And these machines have certain characteristics and imperfections that are kind of nice in music. And in the digital world, we can try, or many plugins try to get close to these imperfections to kind of mimic them to get this nice analog sound. So analog sound kind of also means imperfect sounds that stems from the electronics world, because if you try to make a specific waveform in audio with electronic signals, it's kind of tough to make that very, very perfect. You can get very close, but it's not going to be perfect. But like I said, these imperfections are kind of nice in music. Let me show you one example what that can mean. So we're in Synonym. Up here, you can pick different waveforms and wavetables. And on top, it already says analog, because there are going to be some things in there which are, I guess, commonly known from analog synthesizers, imperfect waveforms. And this one over here is a sine wave, or supposed to be a sine wave. And you can already see it doesn't look like a perfect sine wave. And it also doesn't sound like a perfect sine wave, because if I now press a key, you will see we do have this one peak. So a perfect sine wave would just have one frequency. And you would just see one frequency in the spectrum analyzer. But this sine wave over here is imperfect. So it has these overtones because it's just not a perfect sine wave. And depending on how the analog machine would manage or would create the sine wave, you would get different types of imperfect sine waves with different overtones. So if I go through this wavetable over here, you will see and hear how the shape changes and also the sound. So this is, you see how the shape is changing. Yeah. And you can also see over here different overtones and also different sound, right? So this is pretty cool. We can use these different synthesizers, and we're going to go through different ones in this video to use like imperfect waveforms to create some cool sounds. And the basic setup, I already covered this in some videos, so I'm going to link one here, for example, on how to make a moog bass in any synth. I'm not going to go in depth on this process, but the basic setup would be having, let's say, one oscillator. Let's do one oscillator in Synonym, and then one filter. And let's just pick this Embry low cut at 24 dB per octave. And then two envelopes. So one envelope is our amp envelope. So the loudness, it's envelope 1. And then we can use envelope 2 to modulate the filter. So in Synonym, you have to drag this over here. And then here you can control the modulation if you click on envelope 2. To make that happen. So now that we have a sine wave, there's not going to be happening that much. So this could be like a sub bass, but let's just to demonstrate, like pick this basic mini over here. You see something that looks kind of like a mixture between a saw wave, like a tri-saw kind of mix between a saw wave and a square wave. And with this setup, we can use these different waveforms now to create hundreds of different bass sounds, right? So let's start with this one maybe. I have some drums here and a little bass sound. I'm going to start this very low, so it's going to be a bit quiet. Already make this a bit percussive. And then let's just mess around a bit with the waveforms, the envelopes, and the filter settings. Here we go. Opening up the filter. Maybe some drive. So this would be like the beginning of creating some bass sounds. And with this setup, you can really do so much, because let's now switch up the wavetables and maybe go through some different wavetables. This could be like a lower bass. So as you hear in this one, for example, we're kind of losing the low end oomph. So this would be a good point where you could say, maybe let's combine a different waveform together to make some more bass sounds like that. And let's actually now jump out of Serum into a new synthesizer. Let's maybe go for Silent 1, which is also cool. And here we go. Now we have Silent here. This is also just the initial preset. Here you have also these two oscillators where you can combine some sounds. And the cool thing about analog synthesis is you can really easily combine just different waveforms together to make some cool stuff. And the moment you try this out at home and try some different combinations, you will recognize so many bass sounds from different songs that just rely on this concept. So here we have filter A. Let's do a low pass also. This is already at 24 dB per octave. Let's do an envelope down here. So we're going to be modulating the cutoff of filter A, also making this a bit percussive. Alrighty, then doing a little bit percussive bass sound up here, but maybe this time with a bit of sustain, a little bit less release. Okay, here we go. So now here we have this sound, right? Let's add a bit of resonance. Let's now make like maybe a funky bass, and you can, for example, use two pulse waves, which is a square wave, and pitch them one octave apart. There we go. So this would be the two square waves. Now we can also say, well, the one on top should be a bit quieter. Let's now say, well, we're going to use on top, we're going to use a square wave, a saw wave instead. Maybe it's a bit too much high end. Let's bring down the cutoff. Maybe you want to make a very snappy bass. If we now, for example, change the envelope also for the filter. Don't like this sound too much. All right, let's maybe say two saw waves. Also kind of an interesting sound, right? What you can also do is you have a saw wave on top, but then you want to layer it with a sub sine wave, for example. This can be very cool. And then also, instead of just using one octave, let's pitch them 1/5 apart. This can usually make some weird organy sounds. So perfect fifth would be like a +7 semitones. And use two saw waves. So I'm going over this a little bit fast, simply because you should try out these different combinations. It's kind of like practicing at home. If you want to get, not only if you want to get into synthesis, but also if you want to be able to tweak presets and understand them a little bit better. Just going over this like maybe 1 or 2 hours, checking out these different combinations in just one of your favorite synthesizers can make you a better producer and sound designer, of course. All right, let's leave Silent and jump into Diva to finish things up. Here we have Diva. And this is in the Jupiter setting. So in here you have this analog shape setting over here. And the best way to figure out what this does is either check the manual or go through it with your ears. That's why I felt like if it's part of analog synthesis to kind of have these features to use different waveforms and to get an ear for this. Let's kind of use the sine wave, for example. Listen to this in analog 1. All right, analog 2. Okay, so analog 1 is more distorted, more overtones for the sine wave, and then ideal, yeah, sine wave. Let's check it for the triangle, analog 1, ideal. All right, so for the sine wave, for example, analog 2 was less bright than analog 1, but for the triangle, it's the other way around. So getting familiar with this stuff and checking it out in your different synthesizers also makes a lot of sense. So yeah, and also in this setup, you can pick all these different combinations and go through them. I'm kind of purposefully not showing too much because I think it's also, the part is also to check this out on your own time because it's not going to stick otherwise. But you can do much, but you can also just keep in mind, play with the different settings, make some bass sounds, and you can also make some cool effect sounds. For example, if you MIDI control one of these parameters or a cutoff, like moving it around like this. This is all parts of making analog bass sounds, and you can combine all this stuff to make a bunch of different presets. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and I hope to see you soon. Peace.